In this series, we're hoping to bring to you relevant topics for understanding, action, and helping improve your risk posture in your computing environment. Cyber Houston is a nonprofit initiative created by businesses and community leaders to address the growing risks and challenges of cybersecurity. We've worked with industry experts to publish playbooks, guidelines, and frameworks that are accessible to organizations of all sizes. Our mission is to educate, empower, and engage. You can learn more about our mission, resources, and upcoming events at cyberhouston.org. Today, we're going to talk about indicators of compromise, risk, and the conversation is really going to flow pretty naturally between the three of us. We'll have some different thoughts on the topic. To really get us started, though, I'd like Pierluigi to kind of talk about a recent conversation he had with a customer regarding indicators of compromise and how we truly derive a risk rating from what we're seeing.
Yes, thank you, and welcome everyone. The conversation was more in terms of understanding the risk, right? The risk rating. The customer in question is the CIO of a bank that needed to report to his board to give a feeling. Are we spending our money correctly? Is the money going in the right place? Are we safe? Are we secure? Are we doing the right things? And one of the things he was looking at was the report, the KPI report, that over time had gone from about 10 million attacks per week blocked, all of a sudden to 40 million. And the assumption here was, oh my God, the risk has gone up. What do I do, right? Well, and we had this conversation, and I expressed my opinion in a different direction, right? The one thing that I like to explain, to clarify things, we're used to thinking that quantity matters, because, for example, if I shoot a bullet at a bulletproof window, one may not do anything, but 10 million of them will probably crack the window, right? Well, firewalls don't work the way. Whether you scan it with one scan a day or a billion scans per day, the only difference is that you end up on a DDoS attack. That's a different thing, but you won't get through, right? The firewall isn't all of a sudden deciding to open a port because you asked a billion times. It's just not going to happen. So that is not a risk, right? So how do you evaluate the risk or the security posture of your company? In my opinion, is not with numbers, at least not with this kind of numbers. Certainly, if somebody all of a sudden is attacking you 40 million times instead of 10 million times, maybe it's an indication that somebody wants to get through. Maybe, but then there is further analysis that needs to be done. Are they going after the same port over and over? Are the scans coming from 40 million IP addresses or from a handful of IP addresses? Is it a targeted attack? Is it just random stuff that's happening because it happens all the time? These are all valid questions that need to be answered before concluding that we are 4 times more at risk all of a sudden. The risk hasn't changed because the configuration didn't change and nothing else changed. But before we say that, we should probably go and do a proper evaluation of the current configuration, not just the configuration of the firewalls, but also the configuration of the entire network, right? And I'm opening up to my colleagues here for their opinions.
Yeah, so the number of packets that we're blocking at an external firewall, I've seen many people use that as a metric for board reporting. I think what it overlooks is the fact we can't control what's happening on the internet. And there could have been a recent announcement of a significant vulnerability on a piece of technology. And so hackers go wild and they're scanning the entire internet for a very specific open and listening port that's associated with that technology. So that could be reason for a significant bump. Another thing to take into account, and this isn't commonly known, if I'm running a small business and I'm not a cyber person, I don't know that there's multiple projects across the internet that scan the entire internet every single day, all day, looking for open ports. There's at least a half a dozen, 10 different projects doing that. Furthermore, there's different tooling that's been created to enable mass scanning of the entire internet that anybody could use. So I move away from that which I can't control into a zone that I can control. And when Pierluigi talks about configurations, I'm going to maybe dissect the data, those 40 million attempts. I'm going to dissect it just to see if I can make some sense of it. Is what are my top source IPs shooting bullets, cyber bullets at me? Where are those bullets aimed for? It's not just coming to an IP address. It's going to a specific service on a machine. They're hoping that I'm running it. Maybe it's vulnerable. I want to get a picture of that. And then I'm looking at what's allowed through the firewall, why is it allowed, and where does it go? And so now I can be looking at other log sources downstream, correlating it a degree with those firewall blocks to understand if a very determined adversary who keeps getting blocked finally slid one through based on my configuration to a backend server, and I can go deeper and deeper and try to really understand intent. That's where the risk lies.
Yeah, I think that someone, and this is my opinion, someone reporting amount of blocks at the edge device, like a firewall, to a board, I think it's a little bit, it's quite technical. I don't think the board really cares about this type of stuff.
The problem is the board doesn't. The people at the board that don't know cybersecurity don't know what to make of anything else, so they want the numbers. They want pie charts and the graphs that they can. It's gone up, it's gone down, right?
Yeah,
if it's gone up, it's bad. Down is fine. It's good.
But I think that's our work, right? To represent risk based on numbers is what you just were mentioning.
Yeah, it's incorrect.
Right? It's incorrect. To me, it's an incorrect KPI to represent risk.
Yes.
I think there has been a lot of changes about how companies represent exposure and exposure risk. So people understand really what is the threat level that you can have in your exposed services through the firewall.
Correct.
I think to me, that's a much more valid point. Correct. Because at the end, the risk should be based on those aspects.
Maybe.
And to talk a little about what you say about configuration, and Pierluigi, I'm sure that you have seen this. Firewalls, a lot of people think that they're a device that you set and forget, and that's so wrong, right? Firewalls are not set and forget. There are best practices that all the time you have to follow. There are rule configurations that you have to do. For example, PCI will require that you at least every 6 months you audit your firewall rules. There's new benchmarks all the time about the firewalls. And what I have seen, and I'm sure Pierluigi, with your migration, you have seen this too, is that people tend to put the firewall and then they never touch it again, right? And that is still non-configurable at the edge of your network, which of course now the problem is not the amount of attacks that you're having, but the exposure that you have in that device because it has not been maintained in ages, like a very old firmware and probably insecure ports still.
Exactly. And these are the things that need to be monitored more. Right? First of all, I was discussing this earlier with John. There seems to be a misunderstanding outside of the world of cybersecurity about how firewalls work. That somebody knocking on the door from outside can get through because they're thinking of a firewall in terms of packet inspection, and you may have some traffic allowed from the outside. Right? Modern firewalls use a stateful inspection. If the traffic is allowed outbound, the traffic inbound is allowed only as a consequence and in correlation to the traffic outbound. There's literally a table in the firewall called contract that tracks what you did outbound to allow the traffic back inbound, right? So the only traffic originating from outside that can get through a firewall is if you have a NAT, a network address translation that allows traffic to your firewall to be forwarded to something inside or to the firewall itself. And let's talk about that for a second. A well-configured firewall should never have anything open from the outside, period. No exceptions. Except maybe, I said no exception, but except maybe the VPN, which needs to be properly controlled, right? Other than that, nothing. right?
Except that you have a DMC, right? The DMC needs to be worked.
No, that's a through, not to. Let's make
Okay.
a distinction.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Okay.
To the firewall. You mean to the firewall?
right.
To the firewall.
So
Gotcha.
I have seen
if I'm a
people
small
opening up. Sorry.
if I'm a small business owner, listening to what Andy and Pierluigi just said, I'm going to get with my MSP or I'm going to get with my IT manager and ask the question, hey, when was the last time we audited our firewall rule set? Like, are the rules correct? Technology changes. Andy talked about the fact it's a set and forget. What's even worse sometimes is when you have a string of IT managers, people are typically afraid of removing rules from a firewall. So they'll just start adding new rules. And the true problem isn't that we have too few rules, we have too many. And once you get beyond a certain number of rules, it's hard to keep track of everything in your head. But
John, what Pierluigi is saying, and again, I review firewalls very often, what he's saying is so true. I've seen interface one administration ports open on the firewall.
That's right.
All the time. And this is not because people don't know what they're doing. They're saying, "Oh, I'm going to open it, so I make this small change, and then I will close it." And they never do that. They never do that last part. So what Pierluigi is saying is so important.
Yeah,
Very important, because if they attack your firewall, you're done. If I get to your firewall, I'm done. I mean your network, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because if as a small business owner, I don't know the difference of traffic that's going to my firewall versus traffic that's going through my firewall. So what I need to do is, grab that person and say, hey, listen, when was the last time we audited the rules? If we haven't done it in a while, I want you to put a procedure in place whereby we audit our firewall rules once a month or once a quarter, whatever it happens to be. And I want you to answer me a question about to and through. What are we allowing anything to the firewall from the outside? If yes, what is it and why? Is there a business case? If we were to disallow that, are we going to interfere with a critical business application or mission critical service?
You probably don't, because the only reason I can think of to allow traffic to a firewall is for maintenance. And if it's maintenance, VPN to it or walk inside. I don't care. Whatever you do, don't open it up from the outside, period.
Hey, so
the through is probably more important here, because once you open up something through, now you open the hole that if it's not properly done, you can open yourself to a security risk. Now, those are the security risks that need to be evaluated. Let's make a clarification. Here we're talking about ingress, right? We're talking from the internet to you. We can probably have another 3 sessions on what happens inside and all the risk inside the LAN and egress and so forth. Today we're focusing on ingress only. Okay, maybe we should have said that at the beginning. So now you opened up something that goes to your inside network. What did you open? Did you open an FTP? Did you open a SSH? Did you open an 80 or 443, which is a web server? Some specific application, right? So the first thing you need to check is this traffic well controlled? Meaning, can you limit the source? If so, do it. Have you limited the ports? Don't just open up all the ports, because very often when you configure a server, you run a service like a web server, port 443, but then there are another 20 ports open just because Microsoft wants to do that, and you forgot to check them. And now you open up all the traffic, you are protecting 443, and all of a sudden they attack you on 445, or just saying that. So let's also control these from the configuration standpoint. Then let's make sure we have an IPS that can scan the traffic, right? And as you and I were discussing earlier, if it's a web server, you probably want to consider WAF, because the IPS isn't sufficient. It can't do anything about it, right? So there are a number of things that you can do if you have to have an exposure to control that exposure and minimize the risk.
Hey, Pierluigi, I'm going to put on my and Andy, chime in, either one of you, but if I put on my small business owner hat or manager hat right now, and I'm thinking about my institution runs a firewall, a web server, and I have a firewall. I'm thinking I'm set. I'm good. I've got the right rule set, but you and I, the three of us, know we're not good with simply a firewall. What else do I need and why? Like, I know that I open up a web browser, I surf to a website, I see HTTPS, I've got a green lock in my browser. As someone who's browsing, I'm happy with that. But maybe people don't understand that encryption, while it's good for us as consumers, from an attacker perspective, if they're riding an encrypted tunnel, they're blinding many of our defensive tools. So how do we get that as a defender? How do we get that traffic decrypted so that we can find the attacks, right? Because we started talking about these 10 million attacks or 40 million attacks. And what we're trying to do is really refine our analysis to identify truly malicious traffic. And if we're going to find malicious traffic, we know we need the right architecture and configurations. Where does all this encryption happen? And how do we actually inspect encrypted traffic as a defender?
So can I ask you a question? You are the client. So the first question is, what is your web server doing, right? If your web server is just content, I would tell don't have a web server. Just use one of the crazy tools that exist on the internet, like GoDaddy, something like that, and just put that content in someone else, because that will reduce the risk of you having to have an open port and a DMZ and a lot of infrastructure. I will move that away. If you're a small business, and again, the only thing that you're exposing is content. If you have some other functionality,
application,
yeah, like an application really that is behind that web server that you really need, like a authentication process, a form that you're collecting information from your client, that changed 100% the recommendation, right? If you have some level of application that is web exposed, now, of course, you will need a little bit of extra consideration. Sorry, Pierre.
But if I'm a small business, I outsource it to GoDaddy, I still need some degree of security, don't I? Because I don't want my web server being hacked and all sorts of mean messages being put up on the internet when they come to my website.
Let's distinguish, and let's remember we're trying to talk about evaluating the risk, right? So Andres is correct in distinguishing: is the web server just a marketing page that's just a page? There is no interaction except to click on the next link, click on the next link. Or is it an application where there is the possibility of input and output? Right? So in the first case, it's not as the real problem isn't the web page itself, because there is nothing the hacker can do. The page doesn't accept an input. It's the server itself. It's the server protected. So if you're using somebody like GoDaddy, chances are that they're protecting their servers properly these days. A reputable host service. Okay. There are plenty of hosting services that do absolutely nothing. Their servers will get attacked, and you'll find a malware installed in your web server, in your website.
Yep.
Right? So don't go there. Just get somebody reputable that protects and knows how to protect their own servers. They're hosting your page. You're fine, right? If nothing else, make a backup. So if something happens, you can restore it quickly. It's probably not worth the expense of a WAF, web application firewall, right? Simply because what can happen? They can DDoS the server on your website, but if it's GoDaddy or somebody else, they'll probably deal with it to themselves, right? They cannot really attack much of the page itself because there is nothing to attack. They, again, as I said, they can attack the server, but hopefully it's a reputable company that knows how to protect their servers, and therefore you're okay. And when at the end of the day, if something really happens, you have a copy, you just restore it. Right? Yeah, it sounds bad to say it, but sometimes you have to evaluate the risk versus the cost. WAF is a very expensive technology. To give you an idea, ours starts at $12,000 a year minimum. Okay? And in other companies, theirs start at $50,000 a year. Why? Because now you're not protecting a page, you're protecting a website with an application. When there is an application, it means that there is an interaction with the end user, the browser, and the hackers can take advantage of that to input data that can end up attacking your website or your database. I saw an attack years ago where one line of a SQL injection took down an entire database, created a DDoS on the database, and therefore took the company offline. They couldn't do business. Okay, so here now we need to understand that it's probably not at the level of business owner, we're going a little technical, but it's important to understand that certain technologies like firewall and IPS cannot protect you because they cannot inspect the protocol. A protocol like HTTPS or HTTP has we call it a layer 7 protocol, has some complexity to it that is beyond the single packet that the IPS is inspecting. Furthermore, most IPSs today, they can't even decode the traffic because it's encrypted. So they can't really inspect much of it, right? So what is the IPS doing? Practically nothing, right? In this case. That's why you need the further technology. That technology will offload the certificates from your web server to the WAF and will decrypt the traffic in transit along the way. And they will detect, this is something I see every day. We have this technology. Hackers are trying to upload a virus to your web server. Why do they do that? Because if they manage to do that, as Andres said earlier, somebody browsing to your web server later would download the virus and be attacked and become attacked. Or there are many things that are very, very common, like they're called cross-site scripting or SQL injections. These are the two most common. There is a host of these types of attacks. And the most important one is denial of service. If you're hosting your own website on site and you are subject to denial of service, you're probably going to go down completely. Your entire company is going to go down, right? And this is a fact of life. If somebody is attacking you, most likely your ISP is going to take you offline because your ISP neighbors are going to suffer the same attack as you are because their router is going to have a problem, depending on the size of the attack. But you're very technical. I don't want to go too deep into a rabbit hole with technicalities. The important thing is you need a WAF because an application requires a different kind of protection that only the WAF can afford it.
But I think this is related to the conversation of how much exposure you want to have.
Yes.
Because at the end, what people don't realize is that the solution on the information security that we propose and we architect for people to use are based on some of these decisions. So if you say, I want to have my own web server where I put whatever you want there, you are accepting that you are going to have some architectural changes and you're going to have more solutions, more controls, and more management of those controls. That's, to me, is very important. What we see a lot if they deploy these things and then they never touch them again. So this is about risk exposure. If I make the determination that the only thing I need in my web page is a marketing page, the exposure needs to move from you, which are a small business, to someone like GoDaddy, which is a reputable company who can protect and help people to manage the WAF, manage the servers, manage all those aspects. So these are not small decisions. They have a lot of ripple effects when you talk about exposure and risk.
Yeah, I think sound project management principles really come into play here, and kind of a curious mind. What are we trying to do? Why are we trying to do it? Based on recommendations, let's say I'm the small business owner and I'm given a certain recommendation, I can't simply accept it. I have to be willing to question it and say, well, why are we moving in this direction? What's the implication for uptime, availability, performance, security? Am I future-proofed? What does the maintenance, care, and feeding of this look like over time? Is there a better way? Should I architect it differently? If I want my web server to live on-premise in my data center in a protected enclave, but I know it's going to get attacked, Pierluigi talked about a web application firewall, a WAF. Well, can I put a WAF in the cloud? And now everyone who wants to get to my website is actually pointed to a web application firewall in the cloud. It does its job. It decrypts that traffic. It sees the attacks, and it forwards things to the web server in my data center. And there's very strict rules on the firewall in the data center that only allow web-based traffic in from that WAF, right? So there's a lot of questions. Well, like, why? Why would we architect it that way? And once again, availability, uptime, performance, security, trade-offs, care feeding, and maintenance. How hard is this going to be? How agile can I be on the back end? Am I painting myself into a corner? These are the things that there's a script that can be used for software applications. It can be used for infrastructure changes. Those are the types of things that I would be asking if I was receiving a proposal or engaged with some sort of a consultant.
And I think this what we're discussing, as you were saying, John, applies to all technology, right? This is not about only firewalls, right? This is a set of questions that we need to ask every time that we are enabling in a technology adoption project. Because I remember I was working in a long time ago for a company that they would put two VMware and a Nimble to every client. It doesn't matter, what type of client you are. It doesn't matter. So it was the kind of the cut. They will do that because that's what they knew. That's what they knew to support, and that was not what they needed, right? So sometimes we overkill,
Yes.
ourselves with technology, and then, as you can imagine, there's a lot of expenses to maintain that, and it's very inaccurate for what sometimes
I would suggest something else. It's a conversation I've had with many clients. My opinion on cybersecurity needs to be involved from the beginning in every project. And it's something that many businesses, even in 2025, still don't do and don't do properly. They call cybersecurity after the fact. Hey, we designed all this. Can you check it? Or we designed this software, or we architected this. And then you go in as a cybersecurity expert and say, maybe if we change things a little bit, it will make it safer, right? So in the business, as a small or medium or large business owner, doesn't matter. Anything you do should always involve the cybersecurity people to evaluate the increase of risk. Are you designing new software? Make sure it's designed with proper cybersecurity rules in mind. Are you installing a new server? Make sure that your cybersecurity people find a way to install it that won't increase your risk, and so forth. Whatever you're doing in your company, it becomes a mentality. It becomes a forma mentis, a way of doing things safely all the time. And if you do it the way, then you automatically maintain a certain level of risk posture, acceptable risk posture, because every step you're taking evaluates the increase or no, or the decrease, hopefully, to the risk. Right? But do it before, not do it after. I just installed. I've seen things like this. I'll tell you one example. Install the web server. The web server needs to go on the DMZ. Fine. The SQL server is on the LAN. Fantastic. Great architecture. They can't talk together, and I don't know how to configure the firewall. Let me install another NIC card on the server so I connect them directly. I just created a humongous security hole to the firewall.
Thank you. The hackers, thank you.
Right? Exactly. So let's do things properly. Let's do them from the beginning. Let's involve the security people, and let's maintain a proper guidance of how to do things in a way that is safe, secure. Right?
And I would say at the heart of things, we're protecting our data,
Yes.
or other people's data that we're in custody of.
That's probably more important.
A few golden rules. If you've got a server that is exposed to the internet, don't put private data on it. If you have a server with private data on it, don't let it be exposed to the internet. Right? Really, it sounds like the same thing twice, but simple rules. A lot of complex technical solutions, but it's a very simple requirement. Andy, we'll turn it over to you to close this out.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, guys, for this great conversation. Please subscribe to the Cyber Houston YouTube channel and join us every month as we explore the topics that matter most to you and your organization. Our commitment is very simple. We want to provide practical advice and real advice that you can use whether you're the CEO, you're the IT manager, or an employee concerned about security. Each episode that we produce, I hope, is an opportunity that you can learn, share, and grow in your career with expertise and guidance, clear explanations, and actionable recommendations. The Cyber Houston video series is your trusted companion on the path to a safer, more resilient future. Be sure to follow us in LinkedIn, YouTube, and the cyberhouston.org to stay up to date on the latest episodes and resources. One more time, thank you for joining Cyber Houston series. Together, we can build a stronger, more cyber resilient Houston. Thank you.